Have you ever sat alone in the quiet of your home? Sunlight spilling across the floor, the clock ticking in the corner, and felt a weight inside you that had nothing to do with your age or your body. Not a pain, not an ache, but something heavier. A kind of tiredness that no nap seems to cure. A stillness that does not feel peaceful, just hollow. We often talk about the challenges of getting older. Our bones, our joints, our memory. But what if the heaviest part of aging is not in the knees or the back, but in the heart? Maybe it is all the things we have carried. Regrets, expectations, old wounds, unspoken truths, habits that no longer fit. And maybe, just maybe, that weight is what is keeping joy from rising. This is not a motivational speech. You do not need one. This is something softer, something slower. A gentle wake-up call. Because what if the next chapter of your life, this very one you are in, was not about adding more, chasing more, or fixing more, but about releasing what no longer serves, letting go, not to lose, but to return to lightness, to presence, to peace. The Buddha once said, to let go is to be free. So in the minutes ahead, let us walk quietly together through 8 things you may not need anymore. And as we explore them, ask yourself, not what you still want to hold on to, but what you are finally ready to set down. 1. Let go of the belief that there is nothing left to learn. Have you ever felt quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the world no longer expects you to grow? That somehow, after a certain age, you are just supposed to know everything you will ever know, and simply sit with what is, rather than reaching toward what could be. It is a silent weight, is not it? This unspoken belief that learning is for the young, and that once wisdom is attained, it is fixed, like a statue in stone. But what if I told you this belief, the one that whispers, "You have seen it all," is not only false, but quietly stealing your joy? And more than that, what if the doorway to peace in your later years is not through knowing, but through remaining open to the unknown? There is a story told in Buddhist tradition of an elderly monk named Ananda, who even in his 80s began each morning by bowing before his teacher's shrine and reciting one line of scripture, as if he were hearing it for the very first time. A young novice once asked him, "Master, why do you still practice as if you are a beginner?" The old monk smiled softly and replied, "Because the beginner sees the world with wonder. The master only knows how little he truly understands." It is easy to believe that because we have lived through decades, through wars, marriages, losses, inventions, revolutions, heartbreaks, we have somehow graduated from life's lessons. But the Buddha taught something very different. He said, just as a candle cannot burn without fire, man cannot live without a spiritual life. And spiritual life does not end at a certain age. If anything, it begins in earnest, when the noise quiets, when the ambition settles, and when the soul begins to whisper questions the younger self never had time to ask. I once met a woman named Eleanor at a mindfulness retreat in Oregon. She was 76, widowed, soft-spoken, but her eyes, though wrinkled at the corners, still sparkled like candlelight. She told me she had just started learning Mandarin, not to travel, not to impress, but simply because she was curious. "I want to see how far my brain can stretch," she said with a grin. Turns out it is still reaching. That sentence stayed with me. It made me wonder, when was the last time you let your mind stretch? Not towards something practical or productive, but towards something that simply stirs your soul. A poem, a new question, a language, a truth. You see, the heart grows heavy not because of age, but because we stop letting the light of discovery in. A closed mind is the beginning of stagnation, but a curious mind, oh, that is a fountain of youth no cream could ever replicate. The lotus, one of Buddhism's most sacred symbols, grows not in clean water, but in the mud. Yet it still rises, petal by petal, reaching toward the sun. In the same way, no matter your age, your mind can still bloom, not despite the mud of life, but because of it. So I ask you, dear one, what new question could you sit with today? Not to answer, but to feel. What truth have you quietly avoided, because you thought you were too old to change your mind? And most of all, what would happen if you approached this chapter of life, not as the end of your learning, but as its most sacred beginning? Because once you open that door again, gently, like an old friend you have nearly forgotten, you may find something waiting on the other side. And that brings us to another door, one far harder to open, one that leads not to knowledge, but to the realm of the heart. 2. Let go of toxic relationships without guilt. There is a truth most people carry like a secret. The older we get, the more we crave peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from silence or solitude, but the kind that settles gently inside the chest. The kind that comes when we no longer have to brace ourselves before every phone call, every visit, every interaction. And yet, how many of us still keep people in our lives who do nothing but stir up unrest? Here is the hard part. Sometimes, those people are family. There is a parable in the Buddhist tradition about a monk named Tiasa. Tiasa was known in the monastery as dutiful, but distant, always polite, but often withdrawn. One evening, his master noticed his sadness and gently asked him to speak openly. Tiasa finally admitted with great shame that he had continued writing letters to his brother, who only ever responded with anger and cruelty. He is my blood, Tiasa said. I must endure him. The master looked out toward the garden, where a bamboo tree had shed one of its stalks. Do you see that branch fallen on the path? He asked. It grew here, but it no longer serves the tree. Does the bamboo mourn its absence, or does it simply continue growing? Tiasa sat in silence, and something inside him loosened, not in rebellion, not in anger, but in quiet relief. You see, we're taught to believe that loyalty means enduring harm, that love means tolerating pain, that aging means always taking the high road, no matter what it costs us inside. But Buddhism offers a kinder way, a clearer one. The Buddha said, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal, with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Anger, criticism, manipulation, or even just chronic negativity, these are not burdens you are meant to carry, especially not now, when your spirit has already weathered so many storms. I once sat beside a woman named Clara at a tea meditation in Northern California. She was 82, elegant and warm, but there was a weariness in her voice. She told me that for years she had kept attending Sunday dinners with her eldest son, even though every week ended in tears. He criticized her choices, mocked her beliefs, dismissed her feelings. But he is my son, she whispered. What kind of mother walks away? And I said nothing because I did not need to. She had already asked the right question. The next week, she did not attend dinner. Instead, she sat alone on her porch, with a cup of jasmine tea, and the evening breeze as company. For the first time in years, she told me later, I felt like I could breathe. This is not a call to cut people out in haste. It is an invitation to ask, does this relationship honor your peace, or does it quietly erode it, like water against stone? You have the right to choose who gets access to your heart in this season of life. And no, that does not make you cold. It makes you wise, because there is a kind of love, the truest kind, that begins with protecting your own light. When you let go of relationships that diminish you, you make space for connections that nourish you. And as you make that space, something else becomes clear. The clutter is not only in our relationships. Sometimes, it lies in our homes, in our memories, in the quiet weight we carry without words. 3. Let go of clutter, physical, emotional, and mental. Have you ever stood in front of a drawer you have not opened in years, only to feel an ache you cannot quite explain? It is strange how something as ordinary as a closet or a dusty shelf can stir something so deep inside us. And yet, that is where so much of our silent heaviness begins. Not always in tragedy or loss, but in the quiet accumulation of things we never meant to carry. We think clutter is just stuff. Old receipts, forgotten souvenirs, expired medicine. You realize this truth, something else becomes clear. All those comparisons to the younger you, the faster, firmer, more admired version of yourself, begin to lose their grip. 6. Let go of comparing yourself to the young. It happens quietly, sometimes while scrolling through old photos, sometimes while watching someone jog past your window, or hearing a younger voice speak with confidence, ambition, maybe even a little arrogance. And a part of you whispers, I used to be like that. If you are not careful, the whisper turns into a wound. Where did she go? What happened to him? Why do not I feel that way anymore? Comparison, especially with your younger self, is one of the most subtle and seductive forms of suffering in later life. Because it does not shout, it seeps. You start measuring your worth by old metrics. Energy, appearance, speed, attention. You hold a ruler from the past up against your present, and somehow, the present always comes up short. But what if I told you, the you back then, the one you miss, could not have survived what you have survived now, that the version of you with smooth skin and endless energy did not yet carry the calm, the compassion, the quiet strength you hold today? There is a well-loved Buddhist parable. It tells of a young disciple who became jealous of his teacher's serene presence. I want to be like you, he said. Calm, wise, unshaken. The teacher led him to a mountain spring and asked him to fill a bowl with water. Now, he said, drop a stone into it. The disciple obeyed, and the ripples distorted the reflection. What do you see? Asked the teacher. Nothing clearly, the student replied. Then the teacher took him to a deep, still well. Now look. The boy peered in. I see my reflection, he whispered. That, the master said, is the difference. Youth is a stream rushing, loud, easily disturbed. Age is the well, still, quiet, clear. I once met a woman named Teresa, 84, bright scarf, sharper wit. She told me she had stopped attending her granddaughter's dance recitals. Not because I do not love her, she said, but because I caught myself comparing her movements to what mine used to be. I was turning her joy into my ache. So I stepped back until I could watch again with love instead of loss. That, dear friend, is wisdom. To witness beauty in another without making it a measurement of yourself. To allow the young to be young, and to allow yourself to be whole. The Buddha taught, comparing oneself to others brings no peace. The wise do not compare. They understand. Because comparison, after all, is rooted in illusion. You are not meant to be who you were. That chapter is written. And now, you are the one holding the book. Not just the thrill of beginnings, but the richness of endings. Not just speed, but stillness. So ask yourself, gently, what am I gaining by comparing myself to someone whose path is no longer mine? And what might I find if I look inward instead of backward? Because once you stop measuring your now by your then, something inside begins to soften. You become less at war with time and more at peace with your unfolding. And it is in that softness that another invitation quietly arises, one even more difficult and more healing. It is time to forgive yourself, to release the regrets that still echo quietly in your heart. 7. Let go of regret. Forgive yourself for the past. There are things we do not say out loud. Moments we revisit only in the quiet. When the world is still, and the heart begins to whisper. A choice we made. A word we did not. A path we turned from. A silence we kept for too long. These memories do not shout. They linger, like the echo of a song you cannot quite forget. And over the years, they begin to shape how we carry ourselves. We smile, but only with half our heart. We celebrate, but feel as if we do not quite deserve the joy. And when we speak of our past, we carefully skip the parts that still make us wince. This is the quiet work of regret. And for many, it becomes the heaviest weight we carry in old age. Not the aching knees, not the thinning hair, but the burden of what we wish we had done differently. But the Buddha taught, you can search the entire universe and not find anyone more deserving of your love than yourself. That includes your younger self, the one who made the mistake, the one who did not yet know better, the one who acted out of fear, or pride, or confusion, or desperation, the one who tried, and failed, and still kept going. There is an old Buddhist tale about a woman named Khamar, who had lived her early life steeped in luxury and pride. In her later years, she heard the Buddha speak, and something in his words shattered her illusions. She approached him afterward, tears in her eyes, and confessed, I have wasted my life. I was blind to kindness. I clung to vanity. I harmed others with my words. What wisdom could possibly exist for someone like me? The Buddha did not scold her. He looked at her with great compassion and said, just as the ocean receives all rivers, whether muddy or clear, so too can wisdom receive even a life once misguided. Khamar would go on to become one of the Buddha's wisest female disciples. That story has stayed with me for years, because it reminds us, redemption is not a doorway we earn. It is one we step through, the moment we stop turning away from ourselves. I once sat with an elderly man named Paul, who had not spoken to his brother in over 30 years. When I gently asked why, he lowered his gaze and said, because I was the one who hurt him. And after that, I did not think I deserved a relationship anymore. But he was tired of punishing himself, tired of wearing guilt, like a coat that no longer fit. So one day, with trembling hands, he wrote his brother a letter, not asking for forgiveness, but offering it to himself. I have carried this too long, he wrote. I release it, not because it did not matter, but because I want to live the rest of my life free. And that, dear friend, is what I gently ask you now. Is there something you have been carrying, a shadow you have avoided turning to face? What would it feel like to lay it down? Not in denial, but in compassion. Part 8. Let go of the lie that it is too late. There is a quiet lie we are told as we age that by 70, 80, 90, life is no longer about becoming, only about maintaining or letting go. But that is simply not true. The Buddha once said, each morning we are born again. What we do today is what matters most, not what we missed in our 40s or lost in our 50s, but today. Let me tell you about Ruth. At 91, she picked up a paintbrush for the first time, not to be an artist, but because something stirred in her. Within 2 years, her paintings hung in the community center, but more importantly, they brought color back into her life. Then there was Jerome, 86, who began Tai Chi after saying, I used to love to move, and May, 83, who started a YouTube channel reading bedtime stories to children missing their grandparents. She said, I thought no one needed my voice anymore. But it turns out, they did. And so did I. If you are breathing, the story is not over. If your soul stirs at the thought of something new, you are not too late, you are right on time. The lotus blooms not in youth, but when it is ready. A mountain becomes sacred at its peak, not its base. So I ask you, What dream have you quietly buried that might still have breath? What simple thing could you begin not to change the world, but to come alive within it? Instead of asking, "Is it too late?" what if you asked, "Why not now?" And if any part of this touched something in you, let this be your quiet declaration. Write the word "free" in the comments, not for me, but for you. Because aging is not the end of your story. It is the unfolding of your deepest chapter. You are not finished. You are becoming. Subscribe and awaken your mind with Wisdom Kingdom.